Hello and welcome. My name is Kenneth In, and I'm a AARP Hawaii volunteer in Ewa Beach. Welcome to Fast, Healthy, and Ono Cooking to celebrate Hawaii's diverse cuisine. Tonight we'll be cooking the famous Punahou Portuguese bean soup. And I've been told by a source of impeachable credibility that that is the correct pronunciation for the dish. Did you know that between 1868 and 1911, more than 160,000 Portuguese immigrants came to Hawaii with their families to work on the plantations? They made many important contributions to Hawaii's local culture, and their descendants make up a large part of our community. So make sure you have your pencils and papers ready to write down the secret ingredients because there aren't very many Portuguese restaurants on Oahu. Today's sponsors are Windward Community College, Kaunoa Senior Services on Maui, and the AARP Hawaii. So, while AARP Hawaii is an organization for people 50 and older, what it does is for everyone. And we hope that you can learn some techniques through this fast, healthy, and Ono cooking series so that you can build and maintain a healthy lifestyle. Now, regarding the Zoom controls, this is what is a picture of what you should be seeing at the bottom of your Zoom screen on a PC and possibly the top of the screen on an iPad. Everybody is currently on mute. And if you want to submit a question for the chef, please click on the button that says Q&A and type in your question. Jackie Boland, the AARP Hawaii Community Outreach Director, will be monitoring the questions and making sure that you get it, that they get to the chef. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you may type your questions in the comment section. We won't be using the raised hand button because questions will be submitted through the Q&A button. The chat button also isn't going to be needed unless you want to communicate a technical issue to the staff or you get a notification that you've won a prize. 3 prizes of custom spices from the Uala Leaf Cafe are being given away today using a random number drawing. If you are chosen, you will privately receive notification from Jackie Boland by chat on your screen. You'll need to confirm your name and email so that she can contact you about where to send your prize. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Chef Daniel Swift, who will be leading us through this cooking series. Chef?
Daniel, we cannot see you. There we go.
How's that?
Lovely.
Can you see me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
And you can see me?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. It's my mouse. I'm making sure my glasses work to see the computer screen to make the switch. Well, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's been we had last week off, which was kind of nice. Got a little bit of work done at home, a little bit of work done here in the kitchen as well. So it's great to kick off the ethnic series that we're doing to highlight some of the classic dishes over the next 5 weeks of the cultures of Hawaii. So obviously we're a huge melting pot, and it's great to see so many different cuisines to choose from. We couldn't even really honestly hit them all. So I'm sure that we'll be rolling into 2021 with other classes. So thanks again for joining us. If you've been here before, if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. I know that we usually send out our recipes. There may have been a little difficulties this time. I'm not exactly sure what happened in terms of the technology side of things, but you can always email me directly as well, danswift@hawaii.edu, and I'd be happy to send out the recipe packet to you. But we'll get that taken care of and make sure that you guys have the recipe if you wish to sort of prep and follow along at home and make your dinner that route. So this is a little bit, I mean, a very popular dish, but in some ways a little risky because we're calling it Punahou Carnival Portuguese bean soup. And everyone watching has probably spent time at the carnival. Outstanding annual event for the family and everybody go and have a good time. And when you associate dishes like this with events like that, it's sometimes very hard to measure up because we have the sights and we have the sounds and we have the memories of, you know, all the times that we spent with loved ones at the carnival. And that really can't be replicated when you're making a dish, regardless of the same ingredients and whatnot. It's, you know, it's that little special something that comes from being at the carnival. So what I want to do today is go through the basics of what makes up a soup and then the ingredients that I have here to create the soup that we'll be having tonight. I'm always trying to focus on lessons and components of a particular dish or a technique. And I'm going to switch the screen here so you can see these a little bit better, hopefully from the overhead camera, just as I do a quick review of what makes up a soup. So whenever I teach soups, it's always the three elements that go into any soup. It doesn't matter what soup you're talking about. There's always three components or three elements. So you first have a liquid, some form of liquid. You have the body, I call it the body, which is the bulk of the ingredients that go inside, and the seasoning. So it doesn't really matter what soup you're making. You're always going to have these three elements that make up the soup. And then over here, I just gave a few examples, right? So if you're talking about liquids, that can be stocks, that can be water, it can be juices in case of tomato juice or clam juice, things like that, milk, sometimes even beer and wine is used. So any liquid can be used, no problem, for a soup. It just depends on what you're looking for. And then when we talk about body, it's really just the bulk of the, you know, the items that give it texture, that give it body. And it could be meats or vegetables. I put tofu on here. Cheese is oftentimes used, sometimes bread, of course, seafood, and many other things as well. And then the last area or the last group of elements is the, you know, herbs and spices and sauces, salt, oils, meat. So any condiment that you might like is something that you can also utilize to put in there. So, I mean, you could take a bottle of ketchup or barbecue sauce and use that as a base mixed with water to create a light barbecued chicken type soup. So those are the important things to think about. And if you've joined us previously, you will have gone over some cooking methods. So the ingredients that are going into the soup tonight are all right here before you on this board. And, you know, there's a couple different approaches to being able to cook it. You'll see I've already sort of started the pot. It's on low. I'm going to turn it up to medium, and I'm going to add the rest of the Portuguese sausage. And then I'm going to go through the ingredients with you. So the Portuguese sausage, I brought in a couple brands. These were picked up at Times. You can pick them up at almost any supermarket you want. There's usually a mild, medium, or hot. It's up to you with the heat level that you want. So I picked up the Hawaii brand. I picked up Redondos. And then this is a new one, Kukui Sausage Company. I had not seen it before, and there was a tag on the for sale sign that said new item. So I wanted to pick that up. I'm not using that tonight. I'm using Redondos for this particular recipe, but any of the ones that you pick out would be fine. If you're vegetarian, you don't necessarily have to use Portuguese sausage. Everything else in this dish would be vegetarian. You can use a meat substitute or some other item to make up for that. Of course, you won't get the flavor necessarily, but it will be good, a good vegetarian style hearty soup. So as you can probably hear, or hopefully this is browning up a little bit. And here's where we talk about technique, or what I would like to make sure I let you guys know. Traditionally, and Craig, who helps coordinate at AARP, asked this question, no ham hocks, right? So our theme is sort of fast, healthy, and oh no. So to make a stock with ham hocks, which would be your traditional approach to this soup, it would kind of bump it out of the fast category. So I'm using a roasted vegetable base, and this particular base is better than bouillon. They've really come a long way. This is a really good brand. You can get chicken, beef, and this one is just roasted vegetables. So I tend to use this so that we can use it across the board, vegetarian dishes or regular dishes. And it's got great flavor. So that's what I made here, is a little bit of the vegetable stock. And Jackie, you can ask questions if you wish. Anytime.
Well, one of our participants is just asking if you can switch to the overhead camera for a minute so they can see what's going on in the pot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's in there somewhat.
And then somebody's asking, if you can't find Portuguese sausage, what is a sausage that's close to it? I'm guessing that person doesn't live in Hawaii, but I'm not sure. But what is a sausage that's close to it?
That's a great question, though. Any sausage will work, honestly. And I looked up today because this are basically what you see on the table here are the same exact ingredients that you would find in minestrone soup. The only difference is a minestrone will usually have a green bean in it as well. But all of these other ingredients are exactly the same. And that includes the pasta. So you would normally not use Portuguese sausage in that case. You would use Italian sausage, sometimes beef, but it's not Portuguese sausage. So, creativity. So what I would recommend folks do is use the items that they have at home or that they're used to working with, and any sausage would work in this particular soup. If you want that spicy flavor from a traditional Portuguese bean soup, though, you're going to want to use the Portuguese sausage. So there's not a lot.
Well, I've got a lot of questions for you, so you might want to switch your camera view. There you go. So Magda would like to know, was there oil in the pot when you put the sausage in?
That's a great question. There's oil in the recipe, and this sausage I found using it the other day had a fair amount of oil in it. So it's not absolutely necessary. I did add a little bit of what I had measured out, but I didn't add all of it. So if you're watching your fat intake, and depending on the sausage that you choose, you really almost don't need to use oil in the beginning, but it will help in the caramelization if you choose to do so. So you have a little bit of leeway there to play with it if you wish. And then really quickly, Jackie, and then I'll take as many questions as they have. Any of these items can be caramelized to add flavor. So you can sort of see here, you can see that the sausage is browning up. This is where I put in onions, right? And I cook that a little bit more. So the technique and the approach that you use for making a soup can vary a little bit in terms of how much time you're willing to spend and what level of caramelization you give to each of the ingredients. So we try to do this in like 18 minutes. So I got to go kind of quick, but I could cook this for 5 or 6 minutes with the onions in there. I'd probably also put in the garlic. And the recipe that I wrote had the garlic as minced. And I had some really big garlic cloves today. I don't know if you can see the size of that one, massive. So what I did was I just sliced them. If you're cooking your soup for a long period of time, you could even throw those in whole. So theoretically, everything here could go in right now. And I could add the stock and I could cover it and it would make a soup. I didn't even need to brown the sausage, or the Portuguese sausage. But I wouldn't develop the flavors that I'm going to develop if I take the time to brown it a little bit. So yeah, go ahead with the question.
What is the brand of vegetable base mentioned from Faye?
Better than bouillon. And you can find it at almost every supermarket here in Hawaii.
Okay, and I know you said use whatever sausage you want, but Gwen wants to know, are you using mild, medium, or hot?
This one is mild. Yeah, but one of the ones that I got was hot. I prefer hot, but I'm sending some home with Jackie tonight, so I don't want to make it too spicy.
Okay, and then Bev is asking about the measurements of the items. I want everyone to know that in your last confirmation message and the one you got 2 days ago, you should have, and the email I sent about 2 weeks ago, you should have gotten in your confirmation a hyperlink to all the recipes. And that has all the measurements. If you didn't get it, I can resend those, but it's just the words recipes. You click on it and it pulls up the PDF. So you should all have the recipes. Again, with the sausages, you put it in a dry pot. Oh, you've already answered that. There was a little bit of oil. Would sausage break down in an Instapot or pressure cooker like other meat products? From Ron and Jerry.
It should not. There are some sausages that might, but overall they should hold their, especially if they're pre-cooked, they'll definitely hold their shape. They won't break down. If it's a raw sausage, it sort of depends on the casing. If it's a natural casing, it might break down a little bit more. But it just depends. I would go, you know, most of the Portuguese sausage you find is going to be pre-cooked, so it won't be a problem at all.
Okay, and since 5 people again have asked the brand of the bouillon, can you repeat that one more time?
Yep. Better than bouillon.
Better than bouillon.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I'm just stirring this really quick so you guys can see, and I'll go back to the other view. And again, now that I've put in the carrots and I've put in the cabbage, the celery, items that need a little bit of time to cook, I could cook this, stirring it constantly, probably even up to like another 15 minutes, no problem, and develop the flavors in those individual vegetables. But in the interest of time, I'm going to dump everything in. And I just want to point out a couple things. There's the recipe that you get or have gotten doesn't call for fresh tomatoes, although I had one today. So I grabbed it and chopped it up. It calls for canned diced tomatoes. So, you know, in the interest of time at home, they make some really good stewed, peeled, diced tomatoes that already have celery, already have garlic, already have onions in it. So if you get a brand that you like, you can save some time on the back end in terms of preparation by having those ingredients already in the diced tomatoes. And of course, you can use fresh tomatoes if you want.
And Roberta would like to know if you are normally draining the fat before you're adding the broth.
Absolutely not. I mean, what we'll have here in this particular soup is pasta and potatoes, which will help absorb that. But you certainly would not want to add a lot in the beginning because you could end up with a lot of fat on top if you have a really fatty sausage, and you'll probably get more fat from a raw sausage than one that's already cooked because the fats have already come out of it.
So for those of us whose mothers taught us to drain the fat off the meat, you're saying no, it'll ruin the flavor?
No, you're just taking out flavor. And you have to think about what stage you would do it at. So if you were throwing in the sausage, cooking it, and then you're pulling out some of that fat, maybe you add oil, maybe you don't. And then you throw in your onions, you know, you need that fat to caramelize those onions. And then you're adding the garlic or the carrots, and you need that fat to caramelize those. So pretty soon you get to the point where there's not going to be a lot of fat left. It's going to be coating all those items. And it's not a situation where you'd be like ladling off large amounts of fat.
Sure. So Maisie would like to know if you remove the sausage casing, does it taste better?
Does it taste better?
Yeah, like I guess is the sausage casing providing some sort of barrier and you remove it and it tastes better?
No, if it's a raw sausage and it has the casing, you need it to hold it together. Although sometimes what I'll do for like a Mexican wedding soup with Italian sausage that's raw, you split the casing and take out the sausage and you can do little chunks. So if you want chunks instead of sliced discs or, you know, quarter of discs, however you decide to cut it, you can do that as well.
And then Esther wants to know, can you use pinto beans instead of kidney beans?
You can use anything you want. Absolutely. So I'll always kind of bring people back to this. So even though the ingredients here for the most part are the same for across the board for most Portuguese bean soups, there's always going to be, you know, maybe someone wants Italian parsley, maybe someone throws in oregano, maybe someone else throws in garlic chives, which we'll put in tonight. It's sort of up to you. Maybe you don't put any herbs in at all. But when you're choosing the body, the liquid, and the seasoning, that's totally up to you. So I encourage people always to just be creative, try to explore a little bit and experiment. Don't go nuts, maybe a slight modification on a recipe and learn something new and then tweak it again and just kind of build up your repertoire.
Great. And then somebody has an allergy to canned tomatoes. Do you have a recommendation for a substitute?
Yeah, just use the fresh, like the fresh one that I had diced up. You don't have to use canned. You can use fresh and then go with the celery, like I said with this one. Even though it has celery and garlic in it, I still added celery and garlic. But canned stewed tomatoes, yeah, if you have an allergy, just go with the fresh tomato. Perfectly fine. Tomato paste, a chili sauce, or I don't know if that applies to all canned tomato products, but anything to give it that tomato flavor will be fine.
So that answers Sharon's question. She was saying, did you put in tomato sauce? But I believe you put in diced tomatoes, right?
I put in diced tomatoes and it had juice, but you can put in tomato sauce or tomato paste. It'll give you obviously a little bit thicker. You got to be careful. You don't want it to taste like tomato soup. You want a hint of tomato and the tomato flavor, but you really should. And that's the trick with the soup, and especially a soup like this, is when you get a bite, you kind of want a little bit of everything in a spoonful. So that comes back to cutting things relatively small, but you also want to be able to taste everything that's in there. You shouldn't have the celery completely overpowered by the tomato or something else.
Nice. Christine is sharing that she actually uses refried beans to thicken the soup.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great idea.
And Ron and Jerry want to know, does it matter what kind of potato you use?
It does not. Today I'm using skin-on red potatoes because I had these left over. I don't know if you can tell. But when I'd made it previously in the batch that I have that's finished, it was just a regular russet. Now, the thing to keep in mind, and I think we talked about it in a previous class, is this particular potato, your new potatoes, higher in sugar, they won't fall apart. So this will cook and maintain its shape. Whereas if you peel and dice a baked potato, a mealy potato, and boil it too long or cook it too long, it'll tend to just fall apart. So if you want to make sure that texture remains, use either a white skin or a red skin Noop style potato, or waxy, they call them sometimes. So, and I'm going to go ahead and add this. It's got a little water in it that I was using to keep it from browning. That won't hurt it. I'll just add that in. And then the last thing I'll talk about, and then we can just kind of rotate the questions. That's the only trick here, and it mentions it in the recipe, is that, we have to cook this pasta, and in order to cook pasta, it has to boil. So in order to boil the pasta in the soup, that means you have a tendency to possibly overcook certain items. It won't matter with sausage, but if this were a chicken dish, the chicken can become dry and overcooked at 212 degrees. So normally in industry and at home, I would always cook my pasta separate. And then I always add my pasta just before service. So I'll have it cooked, chilled, or drained, chilled, and usually I'll coat it with a little bit of oil. And then I just put some in the bottom of the bowl or on top of the bowl after I dish it up, because it just continues to expand and absorb moisture. So this little teeny piece of elbow macaroni is going to be 5 times as big when you see the one that I had cooked earlier today, because it just continues to absorb. So we're going to throw it in here today, just in the interest of time, because we're at 25 minutes. And be careful with that amount. I think I have a cup on there or so in the recipe. It will expand a lot. So it's going to absorb a lot of that liquid, as is the potato. I'm going to cover it and bring this to a boil and let it cook for at least 15 minutes. And then it'll be ready and done. If I wanted to add, a fresh herb, if you wanted to use, I've got some great herbs from Jackie Malley's garden. Thank you, Jackie. It's over here. Some oregano. It's not in the recipe, but since I raided her garden today, I thought I'd bring some in. A couple sprigs of oregano in here right now would be great. And I'm going to just throw this parsley on top as well. Now, obviously, I take that out when the soup is done. You can also dice it up and add it into it at the end if you wish. But while it's simmering or coming up to a boil and then down to a simmer, it'll add flavor to every item that's in that pot.
So somebody's asking, Charlotte wants to know, if you want something less acidic than tomato, do you have something that is kind of a go-to for you?
You know, I think what I would say, if you get a nice vine ripened tomato, the acidity level in those is very low. I'm growing some tomatoes at home right now. Even though they're small, they're super sweet, very, very low in acid. So look at the type of tomato that you want. Try the different ones at the supermarket or the farmer's market if and when the farmer's markets come back, probably in January. Or they may, I think they're up in limited amounts around town, but just get a low acid tomato. They're not all high acidity, but you'll get a lot more acidity from a tomato in a can. Now, on that note, though, if you've followed us along in some of these classes, acidity is a critically important element to finishing a dish. So if you use something or you omit tomatoes or use a tomato that's very low in acid and you need that teeny bit of acidity at the end, a couple drops of lemon juice, a couple drops of vinegar would be great, because you want to strike that balance, sweet, sour, salty, in everything that you make.
Is Wendell Tengen wants to know, is 212 degrees at medium high on the stove dial?
212 is just boiling. So when you're talking about a soup like what we're doing here, cooking pasta, 212 is the temperature for boiling any liquid. Well, depending on elevation, but we don't really have to worry about that in Hawaii, unless you're on the Big Island at Mauna Kea. But that is the temperature, because your starches cook at 190, 195. You have to bring pastas and rices and potatoes to 195. So if you're simmering this at 150 on low at home, your potatoes probably not going to get cooked. You have to get that temperature up to at least 190. So simmering, kind of like rice cooking, bring it to a boil, reduce it to a simmer, and it should hold at about 190, 195.
Great. And then somebody's saying, is it true or is it a myth that if you add too much salt, you can put in a potato to salvage your stew?
Yeah, potatoes will absorb some salt, absolutely. As will pasta. It's like pasta salad. If you've ever eaten pasta salad the second day, or usually vinaigrette-based ones, especially, they're bland. It loses its flavor. The pasta will absorb that flavor, the acidity, as well as the salt, and taste kind of bland. So it needs to be re-seasoned. So that is true, or I would say it's true.
It makes sense because the tomato is kind of like a sponge, right? Or
Yeah,
the potato is kind of like a sponge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so Anonymous would like to use a ham hock. Does the ham hock need to be prepared separately? And does it need to be measured and added?
It would create your stock. So if you're buying the ham hock, it's already done, it's already smoked, you put it in a pot. There's all kinds of helpful tutorials online for that. Bring it to a boil, reduce it to a simmer. Probably the instructions are on there, but I'd say for at least an hour, maybe a little bit longer simmering, so that it's tender and you can pull that meat off. And then that liquid is your stock for the soup. So quantity wise, you can just follow the recipe for the liquid. If it's too short, you can add more water. But I don't know, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of meat, I mean, you can never really have too much. This one I bumped up a little bit more than the one that I had made here previously. And you can see this one is cooked, and I should have kept a piece of pasta out, but I'll try to pull one out so that you can see it. Look at how much bigger it is.
I think you're going to need to switch cameras. I'm having eyesight issues over here.
Yeah.
There we go.
You can see, the size of this one compared to the other one. It's at least 5 times the size. And it tends to get a little mushy too. So like I said, ideally, if I were doing this at home, I would cook the pasta separate and throw it in at the end. But if you're serving this entire dish all in one shot, you certainly could throw it in at the end, and then just serve it when the pasta is perfectly cooked. And then
that looks good.
I threw in the garlic chives from the garden to give it a little color.
You didn't use the cabbage that was in the recipe.
Yeah. And you could even put shaved fresh cabbage on top. So you have a lot of leeway to determine what level of doneness you want all of these ingredients. Maybe you like a little crunchy, fresh, finely shaved cabbage. You could certainly throw that in at the end. And mine was diced. A lot of times in the soup, traditionally, it's longer threads, but that can get messy, especially if you wear a white jacket and you're eating it. So you have to sort of watch that, but there's no wrong way to do that. So I'm adding a little bit of the garlic chives on top here as well. And then when I was rating Jackie's garden, these are what, Jackie?
Miniature snapdragons.
Miniature snapdragons. So I'm going to put that on there to give a little color. And I can hear this now starting to boil. So now I can turn down the heat a little bit. It's boiling, so that I know it's 212. It's not going to go any higher than that. I can stir it a little bit just to get everything kind of mixed together. And then just reduce it, especially if you have a lid on. It'll boil a lot more quickly. So I'm going to reduce it to a simmer. If you'd rather have it open so you can watch it, feel free. Doesn't really matter. It might just cook a little bit more quickly, and add a lower dial on your oven if you have a lid on it. Save you some gas and electricity. So actually, I'll just leave that open so you guys can see it.
Looks good. So we have a ton more questions.
Yeah.
Before we get to the questions, can I just ask, so Rosalind Sueoshi and Wanda Kimura, you both won door prizes, which is the Uala Leaf Cafe seasonings. But I've been so busy asking the questions, I haven't sent you a chat. Could you send me your email in the chat so we can get in touch around the address? Our third winner was Norman Black. Also, I want to mention that somebody brought up that the recipes in the link are the wrong recipes because there's a July date on them. But I don't know how the July date got there, except Dan might have created them that long ago. But if you scroll down on the recipes, you will find that they're all in there. The reason there's 7 is because the cooking methods that matter recipes are in there as well. Okay, so Dan, can you overcook the ingredients in a soup?
I would say yes. I mean, everybody's a little bit different. That's the tricky thing for folks that might be foodies or folks that might work in professional kitchens. The idea is to have everything cooked to perfection when it hits the table, right? So in a kitchen, I just dished this up, 2 minutes ago? In a professional kitchen, you're already getting yelled at if it's not on the table, because all of the ingredients come together at the perfect time, or that's the goal. And it's extremely hard to do. With a soup in a casual type of setting with friends and family, probably doesn't really matter. But yeah, absolutely. If this were to cook for a long, long time, the pasta becomes mush. The celery will hold its shape more because it has more fiber. The carrots, the sausage can get overcooked. So, I'm not going to say that it can't be overdone, but it just depends on an individual's perspective. So if you're hungry, you don't care, right? It tastes good. You're going to eat it. But, if you're dropping, for this bowl of soup, $40 in your local fine dining restaurant, as part of a prefix menu, you might have a little higher expectation. So that's really the nuances of cooking, I think, for the most part.
And that sort of leads, somebody asked, can you cook this in an Instant Pot? And of course, the timing would be really important, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could in an Instant Pot if everything went in, or if it has the little feature for sauteing at the beginning. So you can still brown your onions, your garlic, your sausage, and then throw everything else in, throw in the stock, pop on the lid. Probably 10, 12 minutes it would be done, maybe even less. It depends. You'd have to practice. But remember that once you overcook it, you can't go back.
Well, the beans in an Instant Pot take 17 minutes, I think. So they might need to pre-do their beans, yeah.
Well, these beans were canned. So I would always, for a dish like this, recommend canned beans, only because of the water absorption. right? Now you've got pasta, potatoes, and beans, all drawing off the same liquid. The liquid which has other ingredients in it, and it would be really difficult, even for me, to dial that up exact. You'd always cook those beans separate, and ideally cook the pasta separate too. Potatoes are fine because you want them to absorb that liquid, and then that would be your ultimate guide at the end when the potatoes are done.
Great. And did you peel your carrots?
I rarely peeled my carrots, to be honest. I just scrub them. I like the nutrients, micronutrients that are in there. I like the texture. I like the look, especially if it's a pot roast or something like that. But you can certainly peel them if you wish.
Okay. And so Ron and Jerry have a lot of questions tonight. I'm going to bundle theirs.
Okay.
One, they're asking, does this feed about 8 people? And 2, they're asking, if you enjoy cooking with wine, what kind of wine would complement the flavors of Portuguese bean soup, white or red?
Oh, good question. I think either one, honestly. I know there's probably some wine lovers out there that would not like that answer. But for wine, and taste is subjective. It's sort of up to you, right? So I could totally see this. I mean, I grew up in Idaho where it's cold 6 months out of the year. We eat a lot of soup. So if I were enjoying this soup, I could easily see a Sauvignon Blanc or a white, maybe not a Chard, just because in my head that doesn't taste well. But a red, a Pinot, or a Cab, or it's whatever you like. So I'll leave it to the professionals to tell you kind of what wine goes with exactly what dish. But what I always say is, you know, if it's a wine that you enjoy, and if it's a dish that you enjoy, then they'll usually go together. There's a few exceptions to that rule, but that's what makes life fun, right? You get the chance to learn more as you go through the process. But I'm really always very open to most things. A glass of beer would be great with this as well, right?
Thank you. And Norman would like to know, what is a garlic chive?
Garlic chive. It's like a flat chive as opposed to a tubular chive, but not all flat chives are garlic chives. And it smells and has the flavor of garlic. So you should be able to get seeds locally. You could probably even find the plant, well, I'm not sure this time of year, at the Home Depot or your local nursery. But it gives a garlic flavor. And they have beautiful purple flowers usually at the top that are used oftentimes for garnish as well. But great flavor.
And Violet, I was wondering, is the Better Than Bouillon chicken or beef flavored?
They have both, but I have the vegetarian one. So this one is just roasted vegetables, seasoned vegetable base. So this is perfect for vegetarians, and it would work with chicken, with pork, with beef. So if you don't want 4 different jars of base in your refrigerator, I would recommend you go with something like this that's more neutral and gives good flavor across the board. It works really well for that.
Great. And Beth is wondering, if you do use actual beef stock, would you still use the Better Than Bouillon?
You could. I mean, this one doesn't have a lot of salt in it, but it has a good amount of flavor. So you could, but it wouldn't be necessary. Honestly, you could do this with water. You don't have to do it with bouillon because you've got the sausage in there that's adding flavor. You're making your own vegetable stock already. So it just sort of depends on what your preference is. So more is not always more, but if you're building a flavor profile in a soup like this and you're using a pork sausage, a pork stock would be fine. If you're doing a beef sausage, then, which you don't see a lot, but I mean, it could be done, or chicken sausage or seafood even, then you try to keep that theme consistent throughout.
Great. And then can you tell us how much salt and pepper you added?
Yeah, for this one, I just added a pinch. You might have seen here at the beginning because I tasted a piece of that pasta, which is done already, by the way. These pastas are already cooked. So we saw the one that was raw and we saw the one that is like cooked to perfection. I'll pull one out. I'll have to switch to the upper view here, but much smaller. So I just go by taste. Taste it. I don't do a lot of tasting during the show because I don't want to be like having food in my mouth. But normally I would be tasting it as I go, and then you just make those minor adjustments. So it's whatever amount works best for you. And just taste your broth. That's all you need to do is taste the broth.
Okay, so we have a lot of people asking about measurements, but since we did send the recipes and we're almost out of time, I'm going to skip that and go to Esther's question, which is, what is that delicious looking bread that you have out there?
Oh yeah, thanks for noticing. You just want a loaf of bread, Esther. We were making bread in the kitchen today, so obviously it makes sense to serve a nice soup with a plate of bread. So this is an Italian herb focaccia, and then we made a whole loaf ciabatta bread. So here's some ciabatta bread. We make bread every day in the kitchen here when we're operational. We only buy hamburger buns. All of our other breads we make in-house. So yeah, this is a really super simple way to make a high quality bread. I think there's a video of making quick ciabatta on our YouTube page. And if you're interested in more baking related classes, I can try to make them healthy. Just inundate Jackie Boland with emails because I love baking. I'm a baker. I've been a baker my whole life. And we've done one class on shortbreads. So in the theme of fast, healthy, and Ono cooking, we can try to modify some things to make them healthy, but it certainly can be fast and Ono. That's no doubt about it. But I'm happy to do more.
Maybe in January we'll do bread.
Yeah.
Hey, okay, so we're almost out of time. So I want to just ask a couple more. Lindy had asked, do you have a favorite quote about cooking? She says, there are rules to cooking, yet you can break the rules. Do you have a favorite quote?
A favorite quote like a quote of my own, I'm wondering. I do have a favorite quote, and I don't even remember where I first heard it, but it's what I tell students about cooking or about learning. And it's, better today than yesterday, better tomorrow than today. So it's sort of that philosophy of constant improvement, constant analyzation or constantly analyzing what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it and what the results are, and then modifying it and experimenting. So I know like that relates to some of the questions about quantities. A lot of people will look at a recipe and if they don't have quantities, just kind of be confused. Where if you think about this soup, it doesn't matter. You could put in a quart of water and anything, bring it to a boil, reduce it to a simmer and season it, and you have a soup. So, I really encourage people to always like break away from the confines of a recipe, honestly. I'm happy to provide them, but it's more the theory. If you think about your favorite soup and you look at the elements that go into a soup, it doesn't matter if it's clam chowder. If it's clam chowder, then the liquid is it's usually milk or cream or both, and then clam juice. That's the liquid that goes into a clam chowder, traditional New England style anyways. The body is potatoes, carrots, garlic, sometimes celery, and clams. And then the seasoning is traditionally, it's thickened with a rube at the time, lemon juice, and sometimes Tabasco. It just sort of depends. But any soup you like, it doesn't matter. It's still going to have this. Though someone who might say consommé, which is a really fine clarified broth, doesn't always have body in it, but not a lot of people eat or it's not served a lot anymore. And if it is, it would usually have a quenelle or some form of charcuterie or duck breast or something in it. So there's always 99.9% of the time, these are the three elements of every soup across the board.
Okay, so we're at time. I want to thank the chef. We have a little promo for you that we're going to go to. But before we do that, I just want to mention to you, because I've had so many emails with confusion about the Zoom link, I want to just clarify for you that for the next 4 cooking demonstrations, we're using the same link. So if you got in today, save this link in case. I think what's happening is a lot of the reminder emails might be going to your junk mail boxes. So save the links. If you didn't get the recipes, look at your last reminder and just check. And if you didn't get it, email me and I'd be happy to send you it as a PDF document. So knowing that I might get 286 emails, I'm saying that, but I trust that you'll first look before you email me. So now I'm gonna just turn it over to Ken for one last promo about a few upcoming activities. Let's see. Can you see my screen? You can, but you're seeing too much of it. Hold on. From current slide, and we're gonna go.
Okay, so thank you very much for your great questions. We also want to remind you that the AARP Hawaii will be hosting a live online concert tomorrow with ukulele virtuoso Taimani. The concert will be provided as an enjoyable Pauhana event to celebrate family caregivers, and there will be 5 prize drawings for $100 worth of food from your local farm hub. This concert is open to anyone, although winners of the prize drawings need to be 18 years or older and legal resident of Hawaii.
Yes, and I just want to mention, since our faces are blocking it, that the CVent, it's cvent.com Taimane 20 if you're looking to register, but it's also at aarp.org/HI on our calendar.
And finally, we want to end with this announcement. November is National Caregiver Month, and the AARP Hawaii is hosting a series of sessions for people who are helping older adults to live in the community. These sessions will happen every Wednesday for the next 3 months. You can sign up for one session or all of them at the site that's listed on the slide. So 1 in 4 people in Hawaii are helping an older person to stay independent and at home. Please be sure to let them know that these sessions are happening. AARP membership is not required to attend these sessions. So we'll leave this slide up for a few minutes so you can take a look at some of the topics to be covered.
Thanks, Ken.
A big mahalo to all of you for joining us tonight. And we hope to see you again next week as we continue to celebrate Hawaii's diverse and ono cuisine.
Thanks, Ken.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you so much. And just to clarify, Dan, you may want to look at the Q&A. We have 15 additional questions that just came in, but somebody mentioned that the Taimane slide said October. It's November 6th, so it's tomorrow, as Ken mentioned.
Yeah, I'm happy to stay and answer questions if you've got time, Jackie.
Fine with me if people are still staying on. It looks like we got 221 people on. So so let's see. Some of these are AARP. Is the class for caregivers only? No, you know, it's super helpful, those classes, if you're planning for your own aging. Pat Bemis is asking, to make the soup vegetarian, what would you, I know you mentioned it before, but what did you say you would substitute for sausage?
They make vegan sausage that you can find at Whole Foods. Even tofu would be good. You could use, I don't know, butternut squash. There's a lot of different things that can give you sort of the texture. Nothing can really give you necessarily that flavor unless it's a substitute that's made to take the place of a meat product or sausage or something.
Thank you. Debbie wanted to know who won the seasoning. So that was Rosalind Suiyoshi, Wanda Kimura, and Norman Black. They all contacted me in the chat, so they all will get those seasonings. Let's see. Oh, lots of people correcting my typo. Lots of people saying, let's have a baking series. And Roberta saying that Better Than Bouillon has a killer clam base with the clam chowder recipe printed on the label.
Awesome.
Oh, and Stephanie wanted to know, can the soup be frozen?
Absolutely. Yep. Perfectly good frozen. That is a case where you would especially, though, want to not add the pasta. Potatoes and everything else will hold up great. Pasta, it will hold up, but it won't hold up great. It'll be a lot more mushy. So if you
It
just,
ends up being a lot like chicken noodle soup in a can.
yeah, exactly. It loses its texture completely. So just do everything but the pasta. And then always add, if you get in the habit of just always adding your pasta fresh to your soup, it'll make a difference night and day in your dishes.
So you answered Magda's question whether the pasta was necessary just now.
Nope.
Eugene wants to know how much better than bouillon for this recipe.
To taste, I just added about a tablespoon to the gallon, or excuse me, to the half gallon that I had here. It was a little under that actually. And then I tasted it. So I didn't want to impact the color was sort of the main thing, but I wanted the flavor to come through. So it was about a tablespoon.
Okay, and then Dan, somebody's asking you to switch your camera view again. Maisie wants to know, for fresh tomatoes, is it better to remove the skins?
Well, that's a good question. A lot of people prefer to do that because it's, fibrous. So you end up with that skin floating around in your soup. So if you have the time, absolutely. If you work in a classic kitchen, the skin is always removed no matter what. But it's really a matter of preference.
And Sherry wants to know, what is the brand of the pot you're using?
This is a La Creuset. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I failed French. I even studied in France and I still failed. And then this one, I don't know. I just got this one at Savers. It's an enamel coated cast iron one. It's not the expensive fancy kind, although I got this one at Savers as well. Any pot with a lid that's thick will work fine for this. Just try to stay away from the really thin, especially aluminum type pots. You can really burn your food very, very easily. So.
Norman Saito wants to know, are these cooking classes being repeated elsewhere to review again? If you go to AARP Hawaii's Facebook page, you can see all of them under videos. And then it tends to be a crapshoot as to whether or not the recordings work in the other formats. So guarantee you'll find it on the AARP Hawaii Facebook page. The other way, I may be able to send you folks a link, but I have to wait until after this to see if it turned out. Okay, I think we got them all asked, or answered. So thank you, Dan, for staying extra, and thanks everybody for your questions, and Ken for your introduction. Everybody have a great Thursday. I'm gonna go open some wine, and I might have to make some soup.
Come and grab some soup. I've got it here. I know you're just down the street.
Sounds good. All right, see you soon.
All right,
Bye.
Aloha, everyone.
Take care, everyone.
All right, bye.